Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video will be my fall and spooky book recommendations. Before we fully get into the video, I normally would also do a TV show recommendation video for the fall and spooky season. I did one last year and I was going to do one again this year. However, I don't have any new recommendations. I haven't been watching anything new to recommend and I didn't want the video to feel super repetitive, so I've decided not to do a TV show recommendation video this year, but hopefully I will do one for next year. I need to watch some shows so that I can recommend some new ones for you guys, but I will link last year's video down below if you want any TV show recommendations. I have 26 books to recommend today. I decided not to just stick with romance titles. I decided to obviously recommend a heavy amount of romance titles, but also some YA and some just general like adult fiction, adult mysteries. I have a wide selection of recommendations and I'm excited to share them with you. I will first start with all of the romance titles. I do have them sectioned off with fantasy, paranormal, mysteries with fantasy elements. Then I have romance, suspense, romance mysteries. Then we'll get into the YA and then we'll get into the adult fiction. Since I have so many books to recommend, I am going to kind of go through each book really fast. I won't give a lot of details about each book, but hopefully I'll give you enough details for you to want to pick up the book. So we'll start with the fantasy and paranormal romances. The first one I have to recommend is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This essentially follows a vampire and a werewolf who have a arranged marriage to kind of secure some alliances, and it has to do with a lot of politics in their world, but our heroine is trying to find out information about her missing friend. Then we have The Fake Mates by Lana Ferguson. This is about two werewolves who are doctors, and Mackenzie is wanting her family to get off her back about dating, and Noah is trying to hide his status of being an unmated alpha, and they decide to fake date so that people leave them alone. This one was very fun and very smutty. I really enjoyed this one. Then we have The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. This is the first book in the Ex-Hex trilogy, I guess. I recommend the first and second book. The second book is Kiss Curse, and the third book is actually coming out October 8th. This follows Vivian, who is a witch, and she decides one night when she's drunk and brokenhearted that she's going to put a little curse on her ex-boyfriend, and she doesn't really think it'll do him any harm. Years later, she is back in town and she has to team up with her ex to save the town because he's also a witch, and she realizes the curse that she put on him is in fact real and a little harmful. Then we have The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This is a very cozy, cute, found family type of witchy story. It follows Mika, who is used to hiding her magic. She puts up these fun little videos on social media and a lot of people think they're fake. However, she gets the attention of this one family or one group of witches, and they essentially ask her to teach these young little witches how to use their magic. It's a very wholesome and sweet little story. I loved the characters and the romance is just very heartwarming. Then we have My Midnight Moonlight Valentine by J.J. McAvoy. I really love this book and the second book. However, I'm hesitant to recommend this because the third book is not out and I don't think the author has any intention of ever releasing the third book. I wish more people knew about this series so we could bother the author to finish the trilogy. So it is technically unfinished, and I believe the second book ends on a cliffhanger if I do remember correctly, but I really enjoyed these first two books, so I feel like I should still recommend them. This follows Druella, who is a vampire, and one day she is hunting in the forest and she comes across this man who is naked and he has slaughtered a bunch of humans in the forest, and he doesn't remember like where he is or what happened, but he recognizes Druella and he says that she is his mate. And then they go on a whole journey of figuring out who this man is, what happened to him, and why he thinks that she's his mate. Then we have A Hunger Like No Other by Cressley Cole. This is the first book in the Immortals After Dark series. This book is actually getting a new republished edition. This is what the new cover looks like. This book is actually technically not out until the end of October, I think like October 22nd or something like that. I love this new cover. I did pre-order it because I'm very excited to reread this book. I did initially give this 5 stars, and I'm hoping I give it 5 stars again when I reread it with my new edition. I don't fully remember what this book is about because it's been years since I read it, and the entire series is very long. There's at least 15 books out, and it essentially just follows a bunch of paranormal creatures, vampires, werewolves, witches. I'm like even blanking on all the creatures, but I swear that there are more. I believe this first book follows a vampire and a werewolf, I think. It definitely follows a werewolf. I don't remember what the heroine is. Maybe she's just human. I don't fully remember, but I do remember really loving this first book, and I think the first like 3 or 4 books in the series I really loved, so I do recommend checking them out, and I'm excited to reread this. Then we have The Raven by Sylvain Renard. This is about vampires. It follows this woman who works at the Uffizi Gallery. I feel like I'm totally saying that wrong. I'm so sorry. And she ends up getting attacked on her way home after work, and this very mysterious man rescues her. A lot of mysterious things start happening. I feel like this is the type of trilogy to go into blind because it is very atmospheric. It's kind of gothic. It's kind of got that academia vibe to it, and I really enjoyed this trilogy. I actually feel like I should reread this because I don't remember anything about this other than I enjoyed it. I feel like I never recommend this next series, so I thought I would, and that is the Black Dagger Brotherhood series by J.R. Ward. The first book is Dark Lover. I read this series years and years ago, and I really enjoyed probably like the first 6 or 7 books. There are, I think, almost 20 books out as well. It is a very long series. There's also like a spin-off interconnected series as well. But yeah, the first few are definitely my favorites. This follows Wrath, who is the leader of the Black Dagger Brotherhood, which is basically just this group of vampires that try to take down their enemies and their slayers. And Wrath comes across this woman who is, I guess, related to someone that he knew, I guess. I don't actually remember the plot of this. I just remember really enjoying it. I feel like there is like a mystery plot in this one. And this is also actually going to become a TV show on Passionflix. They have already casted a lot of the characters, and I do believe they're supposed to start filming any day now. I'm definitely going to reread this before I watch the TV show. And then the last fantasy paranormal title that I have to recommend is, of course, A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is also another book I don't really recommend. I recommend the TV show more than I recommend the books, just because the books are very long and they're a little dense, they're a little info dumpy, there's a lot going on, and so I always just resort to recommending the TV show, which in this case I would also recommend the TV show. I love the TV show. It is pretty similar to the books. There are a lot of things that they did cut out, but for the most part, the essence of the story is the same in the TV show. This follows a witch and a historian, Diana Bishop, who one day in the library brings up this book that has been missing for centuries, and essentially all these creatures are now wanting this book from her. And one of those creatures is a vampire named Matthew. The next 3 books I'm recommending are still romances, but they're kind of like mysteries, sort of, or like more so contemporaries with like a slight paranormal or like fantasy element or like magical realism, that kind of vibe. The first one I have to recommend is Gothic Hannah by Rue Nix. This follows Corvina, who gets accepted into this very secretive university kind of in the middle of nowhere. She ends up attending, and then there's this ball that is hosted every couple of years, I think, and people go missing. When Corvina attends, there is somebody who ends up getting murdered, and it's just very mysterious, very dark. I really enjoyed this book. It was one of my favorite books of last year. Highly recommend it. Then, of course, I had to recommend The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This follows Florence, who is a ghostwriter for a very popular romance author, and she gets a new editor, Benji, and they kind of don't really see eye to eye. Then there is a tragic event that happens in Florence's life, her father ends up passing away. So she runs home to kind of grieve and deal with some family stuff. And when she gets there, Benji, her new editor, shows up on her family's doorstep, but he is a ghost. I love this book so much. It is one of my favorite books of all time. There are not enough words that I could use to describe this book and how I feel about this book. It's just amazing and beautiful and heartwarming, and I highly, highly recommend this one. This next trilogy is mainly mystery, but there is like a slight possible fantasy element, and if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about, and that is the De Vincent trilogy by Jennifer L. Armentrout. The first book is Moonlight Sins, the second book is Moonlight Seduction, and then the third book is Moonlight Scandals. Each book is about a different brother in the De Vincent family, and essentially there's this mystery surrounding the De Vincent family and their name and the very creepy house that they live in. There's this rumor that's been going around for many years that any woman that gets close to the De Vincent family, there's something bad that happens to them. It's very interesting, very creepy. The second book is my favorite because the character is also named Nicolette, and it's my exact spelling and everything, and it also is like an age gap romance, which I love, and I personally loved Gabriel. But yeah, I loved all three of these books, and I highly recommend reading them in order. Now I'm going to get into more of the romantic suspense, romance mysteries. I only have 3 to recommend. The first one is Keep Her Safe by K.A. Tucker. This follows Noah, whose mother is the police chief, and one night she reveals some shocking secrets. Then we have Gracie, whose father was a corrupt officer, and he was murdered in a drug deal gone wrong. And Noah and Gracie decide to team up to find some answers to their parents and everything that went down many years ago. Then I have Butcher and Blackbird by Brynn Weaver. This is the first book in the Ruinous Love trilogy. I have not read the second book, but it is out. This follows 2 serial killers who strike up a little competition to kill other serial killers, and someone just happens to be hunting the both of them as well. Very action-packed, a little gory, but still really fun and entertaining. I really enjoyed this book. Then the last romance title that I have to recommend is Love Game by Tracy Wolff. This follows Anne, who is a true crime novelist, and he is currently writing about a very specific serial killer. His research leads him to this up-and-coming Hollywood actress. Very suspenseful, very entertaining. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. For the longest time, I did consider it one of my favorite books. I so desperately wish that Tracy Wolff would release physical copies of this book. Like, you can only get it on Kindle, which is very frustrating, but I loved this book. Now I have a couple of young adult titles to recommend. I have some paranormal ones to recommend and some just like mystery ones. So the first one I have to recommend is a new release, and that is Immortal Dark by Tyjust Grima, I think. I read this a couple of weeks ago and I loved it so much. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It is one of my favorite books of the year. I just absolutely loved this book. I feel like I'm not going to explain this book very well, so I'm just going to read a couple of sentences here. Orphaned heiress Kaiden grew up far from the society she was born into, where human bloodlines gain power through vampire companionship. When her sister June disappears, Kaiden is convinced a vampire stole her, the very vampire bound to their family. It is very kind of horror vibes, like it's kind of gory at some times, but it is very mysterious. It has this very like dark setting. I loved the like magic paranormal system in here, like the vampires, everything about them is so unique and cool, and I love the houses, and the mystery itself is very entertaining and very engaging. I also loved the author's writing. I cannot gush enough about this book. I loved it so much. And there is a very, very, very slow burn romance, and it is true enemies to lovers. Highly recommend. I have some other like older YA titles to recommend that I personally still love. That is Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead. This is essentially about these vampires at this school and threats that are happening to the princess, and her guardian, Rose, is trying to figure out what's going on. Very entertaining, very fun, definitely very YA, like a lot of dramatic teen girl stuff, but I really loved this series very much, and the spin-off series as well. Obsidian by Jennifer L. Armentrout. If you're wanting something different than vampires and werewolves, we have Aliens. This follows Katie, who moves to a new town, and she ends up being neighbors with Damon, who is very infuriating but super attractive, and turns out he's an alien. Then we have Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. This is the first book in the series. There are 4 books. I loved this series. It follows all the same characters, and each book is kind of a different vibe, different setting. This one is obviously about Jack the Ripper, and then we have the second book, which is about Dracula, then we have Houdini, and then the Devil. This follows Audrey Rose, who's interested in forensic medicine, and she's kind of the only girl in her class, and she ends up striking a friendship with Thomas, and they just so happen to come across some murders, and they decide to try to figure out and solve the murder. Then I have The Madman's Daughter by Megan Shepherd. This is a fantastic trilogy that I read back in 2013, I think. It's been a really long time, but this is also a trilogy I would love to reread at some point. This is inspired by the island of Dr. Moreau, and it essentially follows Juliette Moreau. She is dealing with the aftermath of the scandal and rumors of her father's gruesome experiments. However, she gets word that he is still alive and continuing to do his experiments on this island. So Juliette embarks on this journey to go there and to put a stop to everything. Very gothic, very mysterious, very dark. I really, really enjoyed this trilogy back in the day. The last recommendation that I have for my young adult books is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the first book in a 4-book series, I think. I read the entire series. I loved it. This follows Cassie, who has a talent for reading people and picking up on tiny details, and the FBI ends up knocking on her door to welcome her into this program with other like special gifted teenagers that have unique talents like she does, and they basically form this little group that helps solve murders. To end this video, I have 5 other recommendations, and these are just kind of adult mysteries, fiction, thrillers, just random other adult recommendations that don't really fit in the romance genre. So we, of course, have The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I feel like this is such a staple book to recommend for this time of year. This just follows a group of students in this class that are very mysterious, very secretive, and they kind of have an obsession with death and life and all of those interesting things. I'm sure you've been recommended this a million times by other people, but it is truly that good of a book and perfect to read around this time of the year. Then we have Night Film by Marisha Pessl. This I read years ago and absolutely loved it. I remember reading it and actually being scared because I was home alone and all the lights were off in the house. I was terrified. This follows the death of a mysterious woman named Ashley, who was the daughter of a famous film director, and she is found dead in this abandoned warehouse. Her death is ruled a suicide. Veteran investigative journalist Scott suspects otherwise. So he just goes on this journey of like finding out what actually happened to Ashley. There's also like details and like case related things. It's very interesting and very suspenseful. I do believe like the beginning is quite slow, but once you get to the halfway point, I think it really picks up. Then of course I do have to recommend Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This essentially follows this couple that are celebrating their anniversary. The husband goes out in the morning just to kind of like have his own morning. He comes back and his wife is gone and the house is a mess, and he immediately assumes that his wife is missing, kidnapped, and so he asks the police to come over, and there's a lot of mysterious, crazy things that happen. I love this book. It is such a classic and a great book to read around this time of year. This is another book I read years and years ago, so I don't fully remember a lot about it, but I do remember really loving it, and I still really want to read the sequel, which I do own. That is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This follows Victor and Eli, who are college roommates, and they end up sharing a lot of similar interests, and they essentially uncover this possibility that someone could gain extraordinary abilities. Things kind of go wrong. 10 years later, Victor is breaking out of prison and determined to catch up with his old friend, but Eli is on a mission to get rid of anybody who has these special superpowers from the experiments that they did many years ago. And then the last book that I have to recommend is The Girl in 6E by A.R. Torr. I feel like this book is best to go into it blind. The only summary on the back says, "My life is simple as long as I follow the rules. 1, don't leave the apartment. 2, never let anyone in. 3, don't kill anyone. I've obeyed these rules for 3 years, but rules were made to be broken." I love this trilogy back in the day. I would still consider it one of my favorite mystery, thriller, suspense novels. It was just very entertaining and very interesting. So those were all 26 of my recommendations for fall and spooky reads. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you think about them, or let me know any of your fall and spooky recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, follow me on all my other social media, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.